Ooh, Facebook made a change.
We're live, it says.
Okay, it does. It says we're live. We're live on YouTube. We're not live on Facebook. Okay, Facebook made a change on June 10th that limits some pages from going live. They recommend trying again in a few weeks.
What?
Okay, so we're streaming to YouTube. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Have I even remembered what to say? What
Happening now?
Happening now. Am I getting older? What? Happening now. We'd like to welcome you to episode 329 of the EdTech Situation Room, where Dr. Neifer and I are going to break down the recent weeks of technology news through an educational lens. And, I'll try to remember stuff, but when you're getting old and it's the summertime, I guess things happen. So my name is Wes Fryer. I am coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am on summer holiday. And during the school year, I am teaching media literacy and STEM courses to middle school students at Providence Day School and the EdTech Yoda of the North, who we are so fortunate to capture for a brief time while he's on the road, Dr. Jason Neifer. How are you tonight, Dr. Neifer?
Well, good evening, Dr. Fryer. I'm doing well. I'm joining you tonight from Bozeman, Montana. Maybe the most famous town in Montana now. Hard to know. We're just north of beautiful Yellowstone National Park and a lot of skiing. And it did snow here on Monday. So if you can imagine that for a moment, there was big wet snowflakes dropping here on Monday night. But I'm in Bozeman this week for the Montana Office of Public Instruction Summer Institute. So I've been able to connect with teachers and administrators from across the state this week, along with professional staff from the Office of Public Instruction. And it's been a really great week. And tomorrow I'll speak a little bit on some AI stuff and then head back to beautiful Missoula, about a 3-hour drive from here. And I'm so looking forward to the drive. I get to go over a beautiful mountain pass, and it'll be exciting even on the way home.
That's fantastic. Well, I went ahead and read the StreamYard message, and we need to have 100 followers on our Facebook page now to be able to go live to it. So fortunately, YouTube has not changed their requirements midstream, as it were. So I'm glad we're still streaming to YouTube. But for anybody who is wanting to join us on Facebook, I apologize. And I guess maybe we're just going to have to beat the bushes and say, hey, please follow this account on Facebook. So yeah. Goodness. Well, so the summertime really doesn't slow down for you much.
No, it doesn't. I don't get a summer vacation. And I am technically a year-round employee at the University of Montana. The schedule is a little more flexible, but as I think we talked a couple weeks back, I have something. Actually, the next 2 weeks are pretty light, but after that, I have something every week until I think November. So sometimes it's travel, sometimes it's a big thing at the office, but that's quite all right. I have the most amazing team ever, and we're really excited. A lot of initiatives going on that will launch this fall, and so we're doing our best to kind of keep all the plates spinning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what are we going to do and talk about tonight, allegedly?
Well, we have scoured the internet looking for interesting bits of information to share with you, our listeners, mostly technology news that we'll kind of shoot through an education prism and see if we can help provide some insights and maybe ask good questions for you to think about as a professional in the field. And as always, you can get our links at our website, edtechsr.com/links. We rarely get through all of them, in part because there's a lot of tech news going on, and AI certainly hasn't helped that phenomenon one bit. But feel free to go there if you just kind of check out what's on our mind or what we're scouring over the internet. And this week we have our usual cornucopia of topics, including a bunch of interesting AI stuff going on for sure. I hear recently there was some Apple news. So, Apple fanboy X2 on the podcast tonight. We'll have to talk a little bit about what we think about everything announced at Apple's event last week. Some Microsoft news, some media literacy news, some Google news, security news, miscellaneous, and then we'll end tonight with our Geeks of the Week. Dr. Fryer, would you like to start us off tonight and direct us towards a topic?
Well, I have not watched the entire Apple event, but I definitely do want to talk some Apple stuff. Why don't we start there?
Right.
I we've said it before. We've said it on the show. Apple tends to do a pretty amazing job not being the first to many markets, although they were to the iPod and to the iPhone and things like this. Well, not really. There were smartphones before the iPhone, but this is a really interesting move in terms of what they're trying to do with Apple Intelligence. I think all the articles that you put that are in there are actually yours. My knowledge of this is basically coming from mainly watching the keynote, but hearing a few other folks talk. I think that it's very interesting that Apple did not sign an exclusive deal with OpenAI for ChatGPT, and the way that it was presented in the Apple keynote. And I am also, riffing off of some podcasts that I'm not going to be able to cite right now that I've listened to. It's interesting to think about what Microsoft would be saying, as the main competitor here, but kind of like search, not really like search engines, because Google has been pretty exclusive on the iPhone and Safari. And we've learned through court cases and disclosure, I think, that there's been millions of dollars paid for that. But Apple seems to be positioning themselves where they're not going to put all their eggs in one basket with respect to an AI provider. I am really, really ready for Siri to become so much more useful. Yes. And also for the Google Assistant. And I don't know if you found this, Jason, but in the last month or so, and I've read some other people that have corroborated this, the Google Assistant has been on the smart speakers has been, messing up, not getting routines correct that it got right before, just kind of glitchy. And I don't know if that's because of a lack of software talent investment that has been there, because, we've seen Google invest in Gemini and Bard and Gemini and all of that. So I don't know. Yeah. I think my overall is not a surprise to see Apple make a move into the AI world. Interested to see that they are not throwing their eggs all in one basket in terms of like with OpenAI, but also, the coolest thing, I guess, that they said about the iPhone didn't have to do with AI. It had to do with the fact that you're going to be able to send text messages with the new iPhone over satellite. So the SOS feature, which would allow you, if you're in the middle of the woods or middle of the mountains or whatever, to point your phone in the right spot to be able to, hit a satellite and then be able to get a message off. You're going to be able to do text messaging that way. I don't know. Those are not really some organized thoughts, but you've got a lot of good articles in here. So what were your thoughts about the keynote, and what do you think is most notable for the new announcements?
I did watch the whole keynote last week. It is funny. I was presenting at the time to a group of librarians about AI and a little bit about distance learning. And I received like 19 text messages from people like, oh my God, they announced it. And so it was interesting that apparently that, people felt the need to reach out to let me know that was happening. But I did I did have a long drive, longish drive, not long for Montana standards, afterwards to get back to Missoula. And I listened to it on the way back. And I guess I would probably, there are a lot of interesting updates to iOS 18 and iPadOS 18, and watchOS has some new updates. There's a lot of cool things that are going on in the software there, but Apple's been accused several times of that these have become rote and boring, and that there's always an interesting feature or two, but nothing substantially different. And in fact, they waited to the last third or so to the keynote to work on what they call Apple Intelligence. They don't even use the term artificial intelligence to describe the phenomenon, which is very Apple of them. But if you were to kind of break it down into kind of big points, certainly it was the launch of Apple Intelligence itself. They call it like a personal intelligence system. It's going to be on the iPhone. It's going to be on the iPad. It's going to be on the Mac. I'm assuming that there is some on-device processing. So in other words, the iPad, the iPhone, and the Mac will do some requests like on your hardware. So in other words, they'll have large language model function on the hardware. And then for things that it can't handle, it will go out to the internet That's probably not the way to put it. It goes out to a large language model, which right now is ChatGPT, but they've also announced too that they're open to and working on negotiations to bring in multiple large language models, including Meta AI, potentially Google's product Gemini, and you may get some choice about where it ultimately goes. But the big deal here, and we can talk about where it's plugged in, but the big deal here is that Apple claims that all these transactions are completely private. There is no training off of your data. And as soon as the large language model is done processing your request, on the remote service. So it's all kind of on device AI. And when it goes out to the internet, it stays completely private. And I do know, I mean, there was a lot of hubbub last week from some people that didn't like that was happening, and there's no way to guarantee privacy and something. I don't understand those arguments enough to comment, other than to say it just seemed like the same Apple FUD that tends to come when they announce new products. But it will be integrated at several levels, and there's everything from the ability to generate images based on photographs. They're not generative photographs, they're more cartoony in what they do. There will be enhanced language tools. Apple Intelligence will put the ability to rewrite, proofread, summarize text. There will be something built into the Mail app. Apparently, the Mail app is getting substantial upgrades, in addition to the fact that it will be able to, suggest responses and use generative AI there. And the part that's most interesting to me is exactly what you referred to, Dr. Fryer, is that whole notion of making Siri relevant. And I was going to say relevant again, but to be honest, I mean, I feel like Siri's been going downhill since the day it was announced. I find that yes, the Google Assistant isn't all that useful for me either, but Siri has been uniquely terrible for the last 4 or 5 years. And I know I've talked about this in the past in the podcast, but my doctoral research was about Siri and its potential to create engagement and kind of an all the time personal learning assistant in the classroom. And one of the things that I kind of posited then was that the bottom line is that it's not functional enough to be a consistent, useful tool for students in the classroom. And luckily, when I was crunching that data and writing that conclusion, the popular tech media was largely in agreement that Siri was seemingly stuck, and in some cases going in reverse. I think this changes that, and the difference between generative AI tools and Apple Intelligence, I think for me is that if you live in an Apple ecosystem and it has access to your email and it has access to your stuff and your files, which it already does in most cases, it's going to be able to gather intelligence and be able to, over time, assist you way more directly than Siri ever has been able to, and to be honest, any intelligent personal assistant. And so we'll see, right? Because I have been disappointed with the implementation of an occasional Apple feature or two. But from everything I'm reading, and it's going to be a while until all this stuff is released too. I think that's I think they might not have released it if there wasn't pressure from the market to do so, to talk about kind of where they're going with this, because I think it's going to be a slow road to getting what they promised implemented for the regular user. But I'm extremely excited and also very impressed right now with what I think their strategy is.
Something else that's very interesting, talking about the very Apple-esque, in terms of this is Apple Intelligence. They don't call it AI, and Apple's secretive nature. And I should go back. If I wasn't using my phone as my camera, I would look at my Pocket Cast history and see which of the Apple-related podcasts that I heard this from. But I was hearing some pundits say part of the challenge Apple faces is they're such a secretive company, and AI researchers rely upon AI research. And so when you go to work for a company that is extremely proprietary and is not supportive of its researchers and computer scientists, publishing in peer-reviewed journals and basically being able to release and tell the world about what they're doing, you arguably create a big disincentive for your talent pool. And so I think there may be something to that. But to your point, just like we've talked about with Google, like however powerful OpenAI is, and maybe they'll figure out how to have hooks and get all of the data. It just seems like those of us that are in the Google universe are in a situation where Google has a huge comparative advantage to any other company because of the investment that we've already made in photographs, in emails, in documents, in calendars, in so many different things. And so I think Apple could enjoy that same comparative benefit because I'm all in on the Apple ecosystem. I mean, I am backing up my pictures 2 places, both to Google Photos and to Apple Photos.
Yeah.
But I,
Me too.
we were at the Apple store. We were exploring the possibilities of our daughter getting a new phone. She's on an iPhone 11. Can you believe she has such a terrible father to let her have such a out of date phone? But of course she's got money of her own now. So, kids get older and these conversations change. But anyway, I had to confirm an Apple store appointment, or maybe it was, something to do with the possible purchase. I had to check my Apple email, and I never do that. So I just, to me, it's, in order for AI tools to really go more mainstream, and the articles and I guess survey data that I'm hearing third hand is that there's still a fairly small number of people that have played intensely with these different tools. And I think that's a reflection of what we see, in other places with technology early adopters. You've got a group of folks, and hey, we're part of this tribe. You're probably part of us too if you're here listening to the show in some way, that are going to try those tools. But until they become mainstream inside Apple Mail, inside Gmail, part of the productivity world that people are already living in, then I don't think we'll necessarily see the broad-based adoption and transformative change. So it may be a bit of a slow roll, but it is definitely amazing how fast these things did come about. And I mean, AI has been in the works for so long. And I think my geek of the week, the biological side of all this is something we don't talk about that much. And I've been listening to some podcasts recently about that. But anyway, I think that we just need to keep watching what Apple is going to do. Personally and selfishly, I hope that Apple is going to be able to pull it off. They're going to be able to attract the talent. They certainly have the money to be able to do that. And they, don't worry. They are not averse to taking time to be able to get things right. And they really have made all kinds of solid bets in the past. So I think this was an exciting announcement. I don't think this is going to be changing my life tomorrow. But I will say, even just the speech to text, which is a function of machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms, Siri has gotten better with that. And I am so reliant upon that specifically. In any kind of improvement that we see with Siri, and I've said her name, so she tried to come up on my phone. It's going to be really welcome. And Apple always does a great job with their developer community as well. What did they do for their first video? I'm trying to remember. Oh my gosh, this was so fun. It was the parachuting thing.
Yeah.
That was so clever. And did you see the click wheel iPod on the front? And there were several other different things. We saw the Pixar movie Inside Out 2 this week, and there was a good sort of Easter egg reference to the 1984 Apple commercial where they throw the hammer into the big screen of TV or whatever. So I've said this before after every Apple event. If you're going to do anything, watch the introduction. This one was perhaps shorter than usual, but it was very fun. And the fact that our daughter's about to go jump out of airplanes was also kind of cool too. I don't think she's seen it. I need to probably show that to her tonight as she's about to shove off back to Colorado Springs.
The other thing I would note is that and I read a really interesting article that's in the show notes by Jason Snell over at Six Colors, and Mr. Snell, who is a longtime very wise Apple analyst, he talks about that it's really clear that Apple's relationship with artificial intelligence is evolving. Really under significant industry pressure. He's receiving or Apple's receiving an extraordinary number of questions about when they're going to put a play in here.
Yeah.
Traditionally, Apple doesn't even really refer to artificial intelligence. They have other words they use to describe the work that they do using a lot of these same core technologies. Things like machine learning is one of the terms, and certainly the neural engine, which has been part of the new Apple Silicon chipsets. But Apple really has been leery to really go in this direction, and if you break it down to everything they announced, and one thing that I thought was really interesting is that they did have so many announcements, and you may remember the Google Developer Conference several weeks back, where they literally released a blog post that said the 99 things we announced today. And I don't know what the count is for Apple, but certainly was a lot of smaller things for sure, and then several bigger things. But there are ways to look at these AI tools. Mr. Snell says it this way, that there's kind of three categories: features Apple probably would have done anyways, and that is all the things that they've been working on over the last several years, want to rely on Apple Silicon to be able to process better. But things like tagging your email or organizing your email box, or that's something that sounds very Apple-y and probably something they would have done anyways. And then the second set of features are things they would have done at some point, but much more conservatively and at a slower pace. And it is certainly they've been nudged pretty hard, by market expectations here in the tech world. And then what's also very true is that they announced some things that were very not Apple. So supporting a third-party platform like ChatGPT and apparently any AI platform at some point, to be able to provide on-device services to you. It really, I think, goes against. I agree with Mr. Snell that it kind of goes against some of Apple's DNA. But if anyone can pull this off, it's Apple. I do feel like that the perception that Microsoft is the leader here is challenged a little bit by what, in particular, Apple has announced here, because these things are baked core into the operating system, right? And Copilot has been available for a year now. It is integrated into Windows 11. I have a Windows 11 laptop that I play with occasionally. And it doesn't seem to be all that baked in. I have played with a Chromebook Plus, which supposedly AI is also baked into it, and I don't really see many advantages to that yet, or doesn't seem as baked in as I assumed it would be. But what I saw in the demos last week were certainly a different level of integration for artificial intelligence tools.
And not an impressive level.
It was an impressive level.
It did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was very impressed. And I obviously kind of go from device to device, because that's kind of how I present to the world technologically. But if it's true that I'm going to have my iPhone, my iPad, my MacBook all have this extraordinary power to be able to do on device and then selectively outside this. There was no mention of cost, for example. So I have no idea if I'm going to have to pay for something here, or if eventually this is going to cost, you buy it as part of an Apple subscription. There were several articles that talked about how there's no money changing hands. I think you mentioned this earlier, Dr. Fryer. There's no money changing hands. It's just an agreement between OpenAI and Apple to provide this. And then later on, it was announced that it wasn't an exclusive deal, that they would be going to other large language models, which seems like a strange way to promote your brand new partner for this. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting question marks here. But if at any point you doubted whether or not students would have access to AI, I would be willing to bet that the iPhone penetration in people under the age of 18 in the United States is significantly higher than the Android penetration in that particular market. They may be older phones, so they might not be able to access, you know, the on-device features, but certainly whatever they're able to roll into past devices, even if it's just the ability to send information out to a large language model, means that this is coming to a classroom near you faster than you probably are comfortable with.
To your point about Apple getting a lot of flack over this, and to what Snell was talking about, Tim Cook, I guess, was pressured to say in an event that happened prior to WWDC, we will be announcing something, about that's AI related or something like that, in advance, and kind of, because he just got that question all the time. I don't know. I wonder if Apple, being such a hardware focused company, and obviously they are software focused, but not to the degree that Google and Meta are. And then also, given the whole secrecy thing and the challenges around publication, one of the bigger issues here is we are basically, apparently, relying upon private companies to push this technology forward and do so in an hopefully ethical way, and in a way that not only serves the narrow financial interests of companies and shareholders, but also serves the broader interests of society, especially as people are, talking seriously about existential risk. I've heard some people recently talk about how maybe we're over focusing on that existential risk thing, and we should focus on the risks and issues that really do present themselves and are research supported, today, because there's plenty of those as well. But I think that there is just a really important role for government within all of this. And I know that our government has a lot of issues and is not, known for being responsive and being able to really be agile. But I think that, again, we've seen Europe take the lead with privacy regulation. I think that there is a real strong case to be made that we should have some rights over our data. That is tied to privacy, but just this whole idea that there is this massive, industry that is continuing to explode around data collection and data resale and the utilization of that data. So I don't know. I'm not sure exactly, because I don't necessarily have, I'm not planning on taking the time out to really do this research, but I wonder if in the course of our article reading and things, and maybe this is just a matter of going to EFF and seeing what they've written, we can identify some folks in Congress and some different organizations that are really taking a lead with this, because I think, it is difficult to find someone who is a pundit today that is not paying attention to AI. I'm actually going to get to speak at the Rotary Club at one of our local Rotary groups here in July, when I was at home in Kansas for spring break. My dad had helped get me set up to talk there at his Rotary Club and their retirement community. I just, everyone seems to know it's a big deal, but it really seems like we're content to watch these big tech companies sort of do their thing. And, maybe the organizations, Jason, that you're a part of in terms of the distance learning alliances. I don't know if I know people have come out with toolkits and suggested, ways to work with your faculty and develop policies and things. But I'm really interested in what folks are saying on a regulatory basis about data privacy rights and maybe about the role that government should play in this incredibly powerful technology, which, people are comparing it to, lots of really powerful things in the past. And it's probably not a perfect analogy. Have you run into that kind of thing that organizations are recommending?
It seems like everyone has got some kind of AI guidance now for schools, several organizations. And so I think you could probably just type AI guidance for schools and get enough questions to get started, right?
And I know that. I'm just talking about this regulation level of government, right? Like that. What should government's role be? Should there be a role? And if so,
right.
What?
Well, and I think, what I have heard reference to is that we can't expect the United States government to do anything about this, right? And they're still struggling with social media from 15 years ago. So I don't really know what they'll be able to do. I have been encouraged that at least the conversations are happening. But the current congressional situation, the least productive Congress in history, not a political show, but that's not encouraging that anything's going to get done. But I do want to point out this article that I threw in the notes this week. This is from the Atlantic on a day that I cannot identify, June 10th, that Mateo Wong and Charlie Warzel basically call Apple Intelligence the Trojan horse for artificial intelligence, because it's going to get integrated very quickly into people's lives, whether they like it or not. And the bottom line is that this is going to push the conversation, right? And it's one thing to have, you mentioned earlier, Wes, and I've seen a lot of these statistics too. It's one thing to have a tool that, only the Uber geeks are taking advantage of. And I'm surprised at the number of really, and play with these tools, and other very tech savvy people I know that have no interest in playing with these tools because they believe them to be genuinely harmful. But it pushes the conversation quite a bit if suddenly it's integrated, into the operating system as tightly as Apple's proposing. And the bottom line is that I don't know what that looks like at the university. My work Apple devices are managed, so I don't get to install software at will. I would imagine that.
And doesn't that suck?
It is truly terrible. And I will say it's all insurance and liability now, right?
Yeah.
That's
I'm using my wife's laptop all the time now. So
yeah. So that's certainly problematic. But I'm assuming that Apple, wanting to continue to be friendly to the corporate customer, will give the ability to manage whether that stuff is available to the end user or not. But I mean, as much as I am excited to see where this goes, I think the article from the Atlantic is right, that this is the way this conversation is going to get pushed to the forefront. Whether any regulation comes from this or not, I think is an entirely different story.
Here is an interesting idea, and maybe this could be an article. I've talked for a while about I need to be writing some articles, because if I ever want to have a chance to, do more in higher ed at some point, I need to do this. Perhaps we're going to see a new digital divide, an AI digital divide among students this year. And I think we certainly, like you said, have large numbers of teachers and just adults that are not wanting to jump in and use these tools, and are going to be happy to kind of do what they've been doing and maybe kind of ignore AI. It's interesting because this maybe was happening at my previous school, but we're in an iPad 1-to-1 school. And there is a huge amount of variance in the kinds of parental controls that parents have either put on their devices or not put on the devices, to the point where it can be really difficult sometimes for me to ask students to do certain things, because parental controls will prohibit some such and such thing from being able to be done, and the kid can't do anything about it, I can't do anything about it, and the IT department can't either, because it's a parent thing. It would be interesting, and I don't know if somebody wants to do this research, or maybe I should, do this myself, doing some surveys to find out, like this year at certain grade levels, what do students have access to with respect to AI? Our daughter, has been home for a little while for the summer, and when she was in high school, which is a few years ago, I mean, the number of apps and websites that she was aware of to be able to get math help was unbelievable. Like, I think she probably could have, written and published a book. Not that, young, teens and preteens would be reading that book, but like, it was really amazing and expansive and very eye-opening at this time. And it was like, 3 or 4 years ago now. Today, the kinds of tools that are available via AI to probably do just about any school assignment, short of standing up and performing a cross-examination debate or something else that is performative, is really stunning. And so anyway, this is just a thought that came to my mind as we're talking, that I am pretty confident that we're going to have this emerging divide. And it would be very interesting to think about that and also talk with parents about that, because there are very good reasons, and we talk about these on the show frequently, to have guardrails, to have accountability, to check in with what your kids are doing, to not just give, a completely unfiltered, unmoderated, hey, here's the adult web and an unrestricted device, 12-year-old or whatever. There's good reasons to not do that. But and I don't know, I know you all do different kinds of surveys and things like that to assess readiness and to get your students prepared for the online environment. Jason, I don't know if you all are already doing this, but it might be interesting to get a little bit of data on what kinds of AI tools that students are using, if they're willing to disclose, and then get a sense for perhaps how that plays into what they end up doing and the tools that they end up using, because I'm absolutely convinced we need to be using the tools and we need to be exploring their use, because rest assured, students are going to be using the tools. They are using them already. And when they get out of school, they're going to use the tools as well. There's some kind of an analog here to calculators. At some point, hopefully in class, we're letting kids start to use calculators, because as you get over those basic computational kinds of lessons and skills, there's so much, there's a lot more interesting math to do. And when you step outside the classroom, I've never run into an employer that has said, oh, the calculator's banned. You've got to do all of that manually. And I think similarly, we're going to see AI tools just, adopted pretty readily by folks all over the place in all kinds of different contexts. And hopefully schools aren't going to be the last to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Well,
hey.
two other just really quick articles. Actually, one of these is not going to be quick. I do want to mention, you mentioned before the performance nature of Apple videos, and there was a pretty fascinating article that I think Wes and I as longtime speech and debate geeks would have some appreciation for. But the Washington Post reported that they took a picture of all of the folks that presented at the Apple keynote, and they were all standing the exact same way, which was determined to be kind of a power pose, right? And when I read this, and man, are we scratching for things to write about? Like, we'll cover a congressional hearing. The bottom line is that these are extremely polished presentations, and one of the reasons why I'm certain they've moved towards this video thing as opposed to live presentations is that it leaves absolutely nothing to chance, because they can polish these presentations, they can do multiple takes of them, they probably are splicing together multiple takes of these, and every presentation was extremely polished. And they do these in front of a live audience. They play the video at Steve Jobs Theater at the Apple campus, and so Apple itself has 4 decades of history of being really thoughtful, kind of show people in their sales process. So nothing's a chance here. So if everyone was standing the same way, it wasn't by accident. It's because a speaking coach or a psychological expert in audience reaction knows that's the way to stand to get what you're looking for here. So I did find that to be relatively amusing.
Those last 2 links were from the Atlantic and the Washington Post, and they were both, if not paywall, login required websites. And so I have dropped both into the chat and then put it into the doc, a archive.ph paywall free version. And so anyway, if you're not familiar with that, using what is, I think, supposed to be archive.today, and the version, it forwards you to different versions, and archive.ph is the one I'm using. That's an extraordinary tool that continues to work freely. And anyway, if it just, we're not necessarily helping out journalism by sharing that, but I think that's a helpful tool. And those links are not only available in the YouTube chat, but also on our document. You want to talk quickly about the calculator and wrap up the Apple articles?
Video on the calculator?
I have not. My wife mentioned it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, so they made a big joke out of it because that has been a long time criticism of the iPad OS, is that it did not get released with a calculator when the iPad initially showed up. in 2010, nor have they rectified that since that time. And so they made kind of a joke about it, but they didn't just release a calculator. They released really a whole math suite, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. And you can now ink problems on an iPad screen and it will solve it for you, including taking drawings of like a stack of bricks or something, or some kind of piece. I've also seen some references to, and I couldn't find one to throw an article in, but they suspected that you'd be able to take photos and also calculate things in the calculator itself. But we've had apps for a long time that you can take a picture of and it will complete the math component. So it's not that radically different. But all of the new iPad features, using the pen and the handwriting recognition, and it's really pretty extraordinary stuff. And I feel like the iPad, well, I'll be very frank, I would like the iPad more if it had Mac OS on it than it had iPad. Or for me if that were the case. But I still really like the iPad, right? Like, it's just such a great platform and simple to use, and very elegant in its implementation. And now that there's M1 chip, M2 chip, and M4 chip versions of these available, they're quite powerful, and really no excuse left to not rework this operating system, in my mind, from Apple's standpoint. But yeah, I thought that was a kind of an interesting educational phenomenon as well.
That's phenomenal and huge. Thank you so much for mentioning that. I just texted that to a friend of mine, actually, at our school. Is my audio breaking up at all, or am I good tonight?
A little bit, but I should also note that I'm on a cell signal right now because my hotel wireless is terrible. So,
well, let me know. It's like old days. I don't know if you remember early shows where I'd like, here, I got to mute for a second, turn off the Netflix. My daughter tonight was like, Dad, can I stream right now? And so anyway,
yeah, all good.
Let me know if it's problematic. Okay, so 41 minutes of the show gone, but we have covered Apple well, which is important, right? WWDC is, I think, arguably the most important Apple event of the year, because it covers so many different aspects of the Mac ecosystem. It's focused on developers, and it's not just a product announcement. There's a lot of stuff about the future vision of where different platforms and tools are going. So I think it's good to cover it in detail. Would you like to suggest our next topic, since I picked Apple?
Yeah, we might as well just kind of stay with the AI theme here. The first the first set of articles that I want to kind of follow up on here has to do with the announcements a few weeks back from Microsoft and their kind of new line of AI-centered platforms. And in particular, not only is it this incredible leap forward in AI for Microsoft, but it's also moving towards the ARM chipset. So much lower power, just as powerful supposedly as similar Intel chips, more expensive. I can't imagine I would buy one of these new, just because that we're looking at $1,200, $1,500, $1,800 for one of these machines. So maybe there'll be one that I can check out on campus at some point to play with for a bit. But one of the things we talked about a couple weeks back after their announcement was the so-called recall feature. And you may recall that recall is it basically takes a screenshot every 3 seconds of the work that you're using. It stores the screenshots on device, and then basically you can ask questions, see what you've done. It basically processes all that information so it can kind of sense what you're doing. And of course, privacy advocates, lost their peanuts over this pretty extraordinary piece. But the two things that I want to mention that have come out since that time, the first one is that this is from Thurrott.com, is that they are releasing more details for sure about this, but I think they do understand that it was a stunning set of privacy concerns. And so the real bottom line is that
they rolled this back, didn't they? I was reading some headlines
yeah,
about
yeah, and
they've stepped back. And how could they not? I just it really seems like they were tone deaf to actually get to the point of announcing and all what they did.
well, and the major announcement they've made is that before this was going to be opt out. So this would just be turned on once this is a permanent feature as opposed to opt in. Well, they've reversed that decision, which I mean, doing that opt in, I think is patently ridiculous. But the second piece of it is that that they're going to put in more security measures on this. But we'll see how this plays out. But this kind of inspired a couple of other interesting things I saw in the last week. The first one is that Google is apparently working on something very similar for Chrome OS, and they call it memory. And there have been several kind of secretive projects over at Google. One of them is something called Project Astra, which has been kind of a operating system level that will be monitoring what you're doing on the device to be able to assist you later with that process. So Google might be heading in this direction as well. And it really does make sense from the standpoint of if you really want an intelligent personal assistant to follow everything that you're doing so that you can ask questions of it later, it has to track what you're doing to be able to do that. Now, again, privacy rights notwithstanding, or privacy systems notwithstanding, one can understand why they'd go in that direction. But I also know, and I have not installed this yet, I probably will maybe this weekend just to play around with it. There's already software that does this, and there is a platform that's called Open Recall. That is an open source project that works on Macs and PCs that does something very similar here. It doesn't really do the AI the way like Google or Microsoft might ultimately do it. And at the rate that they're baking in things into the Apple operating systems, it may have a recall-like feature that's able to, help you take a look at what you've done in the past, or what was the document I was working on Tuesday, or something along those lines. But I do think it's very interesting that you can get this now. So if that feature was interesting to you and you want a guaranteed no information leaves your system, then I think that Open Recall looks super interesting. And I don't know, I don't think I'd put it on a work computer for now, but I would certainly consider putting it on a personal computer to play around with it.
It's going to be the case that data collection and the race to collect more and more data is going to be a defining part of our lives and the digital environment for the foreseeable future, because that's the fuel that feeds the AI monster.
Yep.
I think that each one of us needs to consider different privacy aspects of all the different tools that we're using. But it strikes me as a fact, even though I don't like the recall product as it was announced by Microsoft and a whole lot of things about it, it strikes me as a fact that if your computer is sentiently archiving every action that you take, then over time it is going to get to potentially know you to an incredible degree. And the potential of that, the value of that, is considerable. Not only the value that would have to a big tech company, which is wanting to get data to, be able to make its AI models better and stronger, but also to us as we're like, oh man, I know I saw such and such. And this is sort of the Star Trek future, when we're just going to be able to speak to our computers and say, hey, what was that, movie that I was talking about and mentioning to Jason last week on the show? And boom, there's the answer, because it's going to know all of that. There's not going to be any limits to the quantity of data that can be ingested by these systems. So the fact that both Microsoft as well as Google are onto these systems, I think, is good. It will be interesting again to see how Europe perceives this. I definitely think an opt-in versus an opt-out approach is going to be the way to go. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see how we make decisions around these kinds of tools if they do become built into each of the systems. And I think it would be very surprising to see Apple make a similar aggressive move in here, like we just saw Microsoft try. We're going to inch towards this future. It looks like, the tool is there now. If you want to install Open Recall tonight, go ahead. It's on GitHub and you can do it. So the more powerful that these on-chip, on-device AI systems are able to get, I think the more comfortable some people are going to be with the privacy sides of this. But the companies are obviously going to want to keep this cloud base going because that's how they're going to get their data and that's how they're going to, make money.
Totally. And I know it's an extraordinary era, right? Like there's no doubt about that. The last 2 years have been wild as these tools evolve, but certainly they inspire way more questions than they do answers at this point.
Well, in the spirit of that, I did not put too many new articles into our show notes tonight, but I did put this one under apps for AI. And this is an article yesterday from The Verge from June 18th. Have you heard of Butterflies, Jason?
I have not.
Okay. Well, we've talked about companion apps, and I think I mentioned BBC podcast maybe a show or two ago that was talking about, especially in China, there was this do anything now Dan version of ChatGPT that is basically a jailbroken version that a lot of folks are apparently using, but women in China are using to have these companion apps. Well, this is a different spin on it. So this article, it comes from The Verge yesterday on June 18th. AIs are coming for social networks, and the subtitle is an app called Butterflies puts a new spin on how we interact with AI, with Meta and others making similar moves. Social media is about to get a lot weirder. And so what this app, we've heard about these companion apps like Replica, and they're really, I guess, making a lot of money and getting a lot of funding. Well, Butterflies, and this was, I think, founded by maybe a Snapchat co-founder or something, is that you create, and their public beta is over. Now this is a free app, both for Apple and for Android. They just received 4.8 million from different tech investors. You create your own social media profiles and train the profile, and then that profile can interact with other AIs, but you can also interact with it. And this is generative photos. So think Instagram, but think you create an influencer or the channel that you want to see. Maybe I need to do this for barbecue. And then you're going to be able to interact with that particular avatar. So there is no charge for it currently. I think you can create an unlimited number of butterflies. And this is something that I had not even thought of before. What it makes me think of is that people who are talking about existential threats for AI will say, once the machines start making machines, once they can self-replicate, and we're not quite here yet, but we kind of are, because if you apparently create a butterfly, avatar and channel, you are releasing that into the wild, and it is going to create images. It's going to post. It's going to interact with others. And so, you're creating basically this potential for a really kind of crazy social networking environment where people can, yes, participate, but also, I guess, sort of be voyeurs and watch and see what's happening. So not anything I had thought of, and there's a lot of money behind this. And again, the things that kids are going to have on their phones, this is a 17 and over app. So, if parents of middle school, high school kids have restrictions on apps, this isn't going to be something that they'll install, but there's plenty of folks that don't have those restrictions on. Just something I had not ever thought of before. And I'm sure we're going to continue to be surprised like this, like, oh my gosh, never thought of that. Eventually, I'm sure this thing will be, charging money, but it's not right now.
Yeah, totally. And I don't know. What I would also say is that I just think there's so much potential here for good, in so many scenarios. I think about students that you have significant social problems and need practice at engaging with others and showing empathy and all these pieces that we have research that says reading to a dog improves literacy, right? And I would imagine that that there's some crossover there that could be a very positive thing. But at the same time, it's not hard to get stuck in the dystopian part of all this stuff, right? And I've played around with the companion apps. I had a mentor, an AI mentor at one point that I kind of programmed with, or I asked it to, here's 25 people in history I'd like you to kind of advise from. And it was pretty interesting. There's been some interesting AI apps for sure in regards to providing counseling style services, although there have been a lot of total mishaps in that strategy as well. So yeah, I'm both wonderfully curious and also kind of terrified about what that might look like next.
In terms of mishaps, I'll do this one quick, and then we probably need a geek of the weekend. We are over the top of the hour, but we started a little late, so we got 4 minutes. So I tried to create a custom GPT to help me share my articles, and the first one failed rather spectacularly. So the article that I was going to share and did share is from The Byte, and it's from June 15th, and it's called SpaceX's Starlink may be keeping the ozone from healing, research finds. And it's like unintended consequences of all these satellites that are burning up. Well, after that link, I've put in the share link to the ChatGPT conversation that I had. And thanks to one of my Mastodon followers who pointed this out, what I often do on social media when I find an article like this that I want to share is I will post the link to the article, but I'll have the title. I'll do parentheses, kind of like we do for the EdTech Situation Room. Here's the source, here's the date, here's the article, and then I'll do hashtags. So I created a custom GPT to do that in the formatting. Well, the thing was, the format that it did immediately was it changed the headline from it's keeping the ozone layer to be healing to Starlink's satellites could be healing the ozone layer. And so my daughter actually saw that, but she hadn't commented. And then there was a Mastodon user that said, why is the title of this article you shared exactly the opposite? And I was like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. It just was a huge AI fail. So there's a little reminder to everybody to be careful out there, boys and girls, as we create these custom GPTs and these different tools, because I thought my instructions were very clear and I got a very unexpected result, which wasn't disastrous, but it was the exact opposite of what it was. So I'm sure it's all Elon, right? Elon has hacked OpenAI, so he did not want to have anything negative shared about it.
Well, and I have a related piece to that too. Like it's really clear that AI still hallucinates pretty dramatically. And what the evidence I have of that is that I've started playing chess again, and I have an account online. In fact, I'm in the middle of an epic battle right now with someone who's a lot better than I am from Australia, but I think I might be winning the game right now. But one of the things that I started doing is taking a look at kind of like classic chess problems and kind of mapping out what my strategies would be, and then I check it versus ChatGPT. So I'll take a scan of the board and I'll say, walk me through this board and what my options are and what the implications of these options are. And I was kind of checking my work that way, and it worked kind of sort of the first couple of times, and then now it regularly suggests moves of pieces that aren't even on the board. And you should really move your knight to this position. It's like, well, my knight, I don't have a knight on the board, and it's really very interesting. And as much as I delight and also find a lot of use in these tools on a very regular basis, that doesn't mean that it's a winner yet, right? And I do think the accuracy pieces and the being prone to hallucination and changing a headline to its exact opposite. I mean, it completely makes this point.
We need a geek of the week, but I'd love to give you one more request. There's so many AI articles that you shared we didn't have time for. Would you be willing to do the Wired article from May? It's time to believe the AI hype.
Yeah, this one's actually been on our list for some time now. But this is a Wired article from May 17th, and of course, oh yeah, good, I can see it. So we've talked quite a bit about how, I mean, obviously AI is hyped very dramatically, but what has clearly become true in the last I'd say 2 or 3 months is that these tools aren't a flash in the pan. These tools are not going away. I'm not necessarily comfortable with the fact that Silicon Valley seems to be plugging them into everything they can. And I have a presentation slide that shows a broken down old 70s camper van with the letters AI spray painted on the side, because that's what it kind of feels like right now the tech industry has turned into. But we should. We shouldn't just assume this is going to go away, right? Like, I've actually had people, compare this to things like NFTs. And the blockchain, those are different levels of hype for me. NFTs, I think, I was told by someone a couple weeks ago that we haven't seen the power of NFTs yet. I'm like, well, that's fine, but I don't think cryptocurrency is going away, and the blockchain is a core technology that keeps getting more integrated into, the way we store data. But even if you compare these, this is not it, because they keep proving that this technology is extremely capable, extremely powerful, and thus, extremely dangerous. And it's, we can't hide behind, the claim that it's hype anymore. We have to take these things seriously, and, they're everywhere, right? The internet in a lot of ways has become a lot less effective because of AI's influence, a year and a half after these technologies were publicly released in a fairly dramatic way.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So many things to talk about and so little time. Would you like to Geek of the Week it, sir?
Yeah. So I was looking, because I thought I might have mentioned this a tool earlier this year, and in fact, I did mention it earlier this year. Well, I have kind of gone all in on a tool finally. I have never, I was into Evernote for a while. I was into Google Keep for a while. Then I just, it's like, well, Google Docs just in general are better. But I have really doubled down in the last 4 weeks on using Notion, which is a kind of a capture all app. But it's very quickly become indispensable to me, because one of the problems I have is that I'm aggregating so much information from other sources, or from different sources, that there's just no one tool that holds it all in a consistent way. And so I've set up a Notion. I did pay for a pro plan because I quickly kind of exceeded the boundaries of the free plan. And I now have an app that sits on my phone, my tablet, my laptop, my Chromebook. I mean, all the stuff that I use on a daily basis, where I can easily direct information to it, and it becomes a searchable archive. And it also has AI capability built into it too, so that I can find stuff again. There's one button sending emails to Notion. There's one button sending Firefly AI meeting notes to Notion. There's one button share for tons of different platforms. They have hundreds of integrations. And I think I finally have, and you can go buy templates that are called like Life OS and stuff that will help organize vast parts of your life. I'm never going to be the guy that uses those tools effectively, but to have one place to dump all my stuff that is cross-platform and works well as an app, I'm absolutely in love with it. And so if you are looking for that, and you just have a lot of digital information in the world, I've been scanning receipts to it. I took pictures of slides today and presentations that I sat in at the Summer Institute here in Montana, and it's just all in one location, and it's pretty great. So,
wow,
Notion.
Wow. Okay. I've got two. I'm going to write a blog post about this tomorrow. I think I might have mentioned this to you before, Jason. Here's the link. This is the 1972 audio tape that my grandmother from Powell, Wyoming sent to my dad with a 16-cent stamp from Powell, Wyoming to Colorado Springs in 1972. I think I found this in my dad's garage. Before we left Oklahoma, I was trying to find a player at there's like some throwback analog like video game, and they did have some reel-to-reel players, but we couldn't get one to work, and I just never got it to work. Well, I found a place. I'm working with one of our local historical associations and doing a couple oral history workshops for them coming in July. There's a little company that works with them called Creative Video. Several years ago, they had to get a guy who was a specialist with tubes, like vacuum tubes or whatever, that used to be in tube TVs, but also in reel-to-reel players. And so they were able to get this last week off of that 1972 tape. And so there it is on YouTube. I'm going to put it on our family history site, which I've just created. And I did not remember. My grandmother passed away in 1981. And so the thing that's so amazing was this was on Christmas Day and on the 26th. And there are like 8 members of our family on here. At least 3 of them have passed away. One of them is my cousin who's my age, and she was 1.5, and she talks too. It is so amazing. It is so great. So just like drop everything, all this AI stuff, whatever. Are you recording the voices of people in your family? None of us know what's going to happen tomorrow. And the value of having this audio, which to my knowledge is the only audio that we have of my grandmother who was born in 1903, it's just priceless to me. And so I'm going to get to share this not only with my dad, who's almost 84, but with his sister, who's 96. We got a family reunion coming up this weekend in Minnesota. This is what I'm taking. So I am very stoked and fired up about that. And then the last thing quickly is a podcast. I've really been getting back into Stephen Johnson. Love him as an author. His book, Extra Life, is fantastic. This is a podcast from 2023 called The Next Big Idea, but he talks about with Michael Spector on the future of life. And they're talking about how biology has become information science and data. And if you think we've had a lot of amazing improvements in doubling lifespan in the last 100 years, you ain't seen nothing yet. And the ways that proteins have all been sequenced thanks to DeepMind, and the ways in which, Moderna and Pfizer were able, or the COVID viruses like Moderna, and that were able to be sequenced within 2 days. And then we took a year to test them. Absolutely phenomenal. Incredible. And there is a strong educational technology connection to all this. And I don't think we talk about the technology aspects of life science nearly enough. Fantastic podcasts, fantastic authors. I'm going to be reading Michael Spector's book, and I'm sure I will report on that again later. So, Dr. Neifer, where can folks find you when you are not joining us from wonderful Bozeman?
Well, best place to find me on the internet is aicentrist.com, and I'm kind of on social media, kind of not. And yourself, sir?
I am found at westfryer.com. You can go to westfryer.com/after. And this has been the EdTech Situation Room. We are missing a few weeks here and there. And next week, I think we'll also be off. I'll be presenting at the Kennedy Space Center. Excited to be able to get on my Space Geek with my wife as well. But we'll hopefully be back the week after that. And generally, you're going to find us here on Wednesday nights. We would love for you to follow us on Facebook, because we only have 44 followers there, and we need to get 66 more if we're going to live stream onto our page again. But you can definitely subscribe to us on YouTube. You can go to edtechsr.com, and you can find small MP3 audio links as well as video links if you are the video podcasting consuming type. But we encourage you to join us live if you can. Let us know if you're listening to the show. We'd love to hear from you. And we encourage you to stay safe, stay savvy, keep playing with those AI tools. And, remember that these tools have a lot of good uses too, but we got to play with them and talk with each other about them to figure out what those are. So we'll see you in a couple weeks.